Hey everyone, welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Yeah.
Today we're going back in time a bit, back to 19th century Lisbon.
Ooh, Lisbon.
Yeah, with Eça de Queirós in his novel O Primo Basílio. You might know it as Cousin Basílio if you've read it in English.
I have read this one. Yeah, it's a page turner for sure.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely a page turner. It's got all this, it's got drama, social commentary, and it really dives into these timeless themes that still resonate with us today. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at kind of these excerpts that give us these snapshots into the lives of these characters, their desires, their secrets, and kind of all the consequences that come from that.
Okay.
So it's almost like we're stepping right into their world. We're listening into their conversations. We're trying to piece together this really intricate puzzle.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah. And speaking of puzzles, the novel really, it gets into social class adultery. And it's just a web of choices that lead to some pretty dramatic consequences.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what, gets you hooked is, are these characters in control of their own destinies, or are they really bound by the society that they live in?
That's a great question. And that question really pops up when we first meet Luisa, our protagonist. She's married to Jorge, living a pretty comfortable life, but she's bored.
Yeah.
Underneath it all, there's just this yearning for something more.
Yeah, she's looking for something.
Yeah. And that's when Basilio comes into the picture. Luisa's cousin. He's charming, he's sophisticated, he just got back to Lisbon, and
Well, their connection, it kind of rekindles an old flame, and things get a little messy.
yeah, a little messy, a little complicated. Yeah.
Complicated is a good word. The novel, it really dives into, the intricacies of their affair. Even how certain locations in Lisbon become sort of intertwined with their forbidden romance, like the Paraíso room.
Right, it's like the city itself.
Yeah.
The streets, the hidden corners.
Yeah.
It all plays a part in influencing their decisions.
Yeah, and then we have Juliana.
Oh, Julie. Luisa's maid. She's a fascinating character. She comes from this world of poverty and hardship. It's a stark contrast to what Luisa's experiencing.
Totally different worlds. Yeah.
And Juliana's perspective is really important because it shows us a side of Lisbon that Luisa might not be aware of.
Right. Like because she's in her bubble.
Exactly. She's in her own little bubble.
Yeah.
So when Juliana discovers the affair, it's not just about gossip. It's a chance for her to maybe change her own situation.
Right. Make things a little bit better for herself.
Yeah. And that's where the blackmail comes in. Her actions, they aren't malicious. She's driven by this desperate desire for a better life, a way to escape the poverty that she's always known.
Right.
But as you can imagine, those choices have consequences, not just for Luisa, but for Juliana as well.
Of course.
And it really makes you think about, power dynamics, how they can sometimes lead to tragedy. And beyond kind of this central drama, we also get these glimpses into the lives of these other characters, all of them with their own motivations and struggles.
Yeah. It's such a good cast of characters.
We have Jorge, the devoted husband.
Yeah.
He has no idea what's going on.
Right.
And then Sebastian, he's a loyal friend, caught in the middle of it all.
Yeah.
He's trying to navigate these relationships, protect Louise's reputation.
Yeah.
Even though he feels like something is off.
Yeah. He senses it.
Yeah. And then there's Leopoldina. She's Luisa's friend. She brings a more cynical perspective to everything.
Right. She's seen it all.
Yeah. She gives Luisa advice. But it's always with this sense of, resignation to the realities of their society.
Especially as a woman.
Especially as a woman.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because each of these characters kind of shows us a different side of Lisbon's social fabric. The complexities of marriage, the bonds of friendships, the unspoken rules that everyone has to follow.
Right.
And it's not just about the characters themselves. Queiroz does such an amazing job of painting this picture of Lisbon.
Oh, he really does. Like, it's almost a character in itself.
Yeah, it's not just a backdrop. It's more like, another character in the story with its bustling streets, the oppressive heat, the weight of all these societal expectations.
Yeah, like you can feel it.
It's almost as if the descriptions of Lisbon's atmosphere kind of mirror the characters' internal states. Like the heat represents all the tension and secrets they're carrying.
Yeah, and all the unspoken things.
Exactly. And it's that attention to detail, that realism, that makes this novel so captivating. You're not just reading a story.
Yeah.
You're transported back to this time and place.
It's true.
Makes you wonder what details from our own lives future readers will pick up on.
Right. Ooh, that's a good question.
But before we get too far ahead of ourselves,
Yeah.
I'm curious, what stood out to you about the way Queiroz portrays the character's inner thoughts and feelings?
Ooh, that's a good one. Well, there's this one scene where Luisa, she's trying to escape the heat in Lisbon, and she's dreaming of like a marble bath or like a silk hammock, anything to get some relief. And it's like, even before the affair starts, she's already trying to escape reality.
Yeah, it's like the heat is this metaphor for all that tension and secrets she's carrying. And the way Queirós uses these sensory details, the heat, the textures, even the smells, it gives us this deeper understanding of what she's going through emotionally.
Right, yeah.
Speaking of details, I was really struck by the description of Juliana's hairpiece.
Oh, yeah.
The one that makes her head look bigger than it is.
Yeah.
It felt symbolic somehow.
I think so, too.
Like she's trying to appear larger, more important than she actually is in this very rigid social hierarchy.
That's a really good point. Like, it shows how much she wants power. She wants to be recognized, and that kind of leads to the blackmail later on.
Yeah, and then there's that part about Juliana being proud of her pé pequeno.
Right, her little foot.
Yeah, her small, pretty foot. It's like this small act of defiance in a life that's been mostly about serving others.
Right, yeah, like a little bit of rebellion.
It's such a contrast to Luisa, who has, everything she could want materially, but she's still not happy.
Yeah, it's like they're living these completely different lives, but their paths are still intertwined.
Right, and that brings us to one of the quotes that really stood out to me.
Okay, which one?
It's when Juliana's talking about her own life, and she says, "Tienes que servir a te ser velha sempre. Te amo, amamo. Essa certeza dava-lhe uma desconsolação constante."
Oh, yeah, that's a powerful one.
It's like this reminder of just how few options women of her class had back then.
It's true. Yeah, it was a different time.
And that sense of being trapped, it extends to Luisa, too.
Oh, definitely.
Even with all her money and her status, she's still limited by what society expects of her.
Totally.
Remember how she dreams about running off to Paris with Basílio? But then she's terrified of the scandal of losing her place in society.
Yeah, she can't escape it.
It shows you just how much pressure there was on women to conform, to keep up appearances, even if it meant sacrificing their own happiness.
Yeah, you couldn't really step outside those boundaries.
And that pressure is even stronger because of how Queirós portrays Lisbon.
It's true. It's like this oppressive force in the background.
Exactly. Remember that scene at the Paseo Público, the public park?
Yeah, I remember that.
On the surface, it's it's a place to relax, enjoy the evening, but there's this underlying tension, this darkness beneath it all.
Like something about to happen.
Yeah, and I love how Queirós takes this beautiful setting, the starry sky, the music, and he contrasts it with all the unspoken emotions between the characters.
Oh, yeah. It's like their desires and jealousies are bubbling under the surface.
And then you have the opera Faust playing in the background. It's not just random. It's there to remind us of temptation, of the possibility of falling from grace.
Yeah.
It's like foreshadowing what's to come.
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't even think about that.
Speaking of foreshadowing, what did you think about the way Juliana's room is described? That tiny little space in the attic.
Oh, yeah. It's stifling.
You've got the smell of baked brick, the picture of Our Lady of Sorrows over her bed.
It's almost like a prison.
It shows how much she wants something better, a way to escape, even as she's caught up in this blackmail scheme. It's like Queirós is giving us a hint about her tragic end.
Yeah, he definitely creates this sense of impending doom.
And it reminds us that even in a city like Lisbon, there were people living in isolation and despair, especially those like Juliana, who were struggling to survive.
It makes you think about, people who are still marginalized today.
It does. It's a reminder that these stories are timeless. These struggles are universal.
That's true.
But we're getting ahead of ourselves a bit. We've got blackmail, forbidden romance, tragic deaths, and it's only going to get more intense from here.
I know. I can't wait. What else? What other moments stood out to you?
When Juliana confronts Luisa and just lays those letters right out on the table, that's when everything changes.
Yeah, the power dynamic totally shifts right there.
Luisa had this illusion of control, and then Juliana just shatters it.
Yeah, she's not messing around.
She demands 600,000 reis.
Which is, that's a crazy amount of money back then.
A fortune.
Yeah.
And it just shows how desperate she is.
Right. Like, she's not just looking for a little bit of money. She wants to change her whole life.
But what's interesting is how Luisa reacts. You'd think she'd be terrified.
Yeah, you'd think so.
But there's this, it's almost like a mix of fear and defiance.
Maybe she's relieved that it's finally out in the open.
Yeah, maybe keeping that secret was just too much.
Right, like the pressure was just building and building.
But of course, that sets off a whole chain of events.
Yeah, things spiral pretty quickly.
She's scrambling to get the money, trying to keep Juliana quiet. And all while Jorge is on his way back.
And she's got to deal with the guilt, too.
Right. And we have to remember that while Luisa is a victim of this blackmail, she's also part of the system that created Juliana's desperation.
That's true.
She benefits from a social order that keeps people like Juliana poor and vulnerable.
It's like a vicious cycle.
It is. And then Juliana's death.
Yeah.
It's tragic.
It really is. All her dreams of a better life, just gone.
It makes you think, what if things had been different? What if she had other choices?
Yeah, it's a reminder of how hard it was for people like her back then.
And it's not just Juliana. It's all the characters.
Yeah.
Even those with money and status. They're all trapped by these social constraints.
And then Juliana's death affects everyone else, too.
Right. The guilt that Luisa carries, Jorge being completely blind to what's been going on. And then that final twist, when Jorge finds that letter from Basílio.
Oh, man. That's brutal.
Queirós is so good at showing us how complicated things are, how one action can have all these consequences.
And the way he shows how each character deals with it, it's fascinating.
Yeah, Jorge's grief, Sebastian's guilt, even Julian's just not caring at all.
It's like he's showing us all sides of human nature.
The good and the bad, the compassion and the selfishness.
This novel really makes you think about desire, ambition, the choices we make.
It stays with you long after you finish reading it.
It does. It really does.
And even though O Primo Basílio was written so long ago, it still feels relevant today.
Yeah, because those themes, social class infidelity, the consequences of our actions, they're still relevant, no matter what time period you're in.
It's a reminder that these stories, these characters, they have something to teach us about ourselves.
Absolutely.
So if you're looking for a deep dive into love, betrayal, and just the complexities of being human, I highly recommend O Primo Basílio.
It's definitely a classic for a reason.
And maybe in a future episode, we'll explore more Portuguese literature.
Ooh, I'd love that.
Until then, happy reading, everyone.
Happy reading.
And keep sending us those fascinating sources.
We love those.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive.
See you guys.
Take care.